On the good news, I do see that the pandemic's getting better. You know, the numbers with Omicron through January and December went through the roof, higher than we could have ever imagined. Over 1 million people a day were getting the disease. Now, the good news is when I ask people to raise their hands as I travel around Kentucky and I talk to folks, almost everybody says they've had it. I'll say, how many people in the audience have had the disease? And almost everybody raises their hand. The good news is that if you've had it, you've gotten nature's vaccine. You have been vaccinated, way better than any vaccine. Now, I'm not saying you want to get it. Nobody wants to get a disease, but if you've had it, the honest truth of the science is that having had the disease naturally is a very, very potent way to gain protection. The CDC looked at this recently. It's about 2 weeks ago. They looked at 1 million people who had COVID, and they said, who's most likely to get it again? Who's most likely to get in the hospital and get very sick? And so they found that people who had gotten the disease, like myself, but were not vaccinated, were actually 55 times less likely to go to the hospital than people who had never gotten the disease and were unvaccinated. They also found that if you were vaccinated, you were 20 times less likely to go to the hospital. So what's the conclusion? Yes, if you have not had the disease, the vaccine does protect you and you ought to get it. If you've had the disease, though, you should have a choice. If you have had COVID, you're 55 times more likely or less likely to be in the hospital. So this is great news. This is why I think that we should all be allowed to use our brains and use our freedom of choice to figure out whether we want our kids to be vaccinated. We should not be bullied. We should not be forced by mandates. We should be allowed to make our own decision. So we have to put things in perspective. For children in Sweden, they haven't worn masks for a year. They go to school every day in person without masks. You know how many children have died in Sweden? 0. How many teachers have gotten ill? Teachers have gotten ill at about the same rate as every other profession in Sweden. So you can go to school, you can go to class without a mask. One of the reasons for this is that cloth masks don't work. The virus goes right through the pores of the cloth mask, or it goes around the cloth mask. Cloth masks are of no value, so we are punishing our children. We are forcing our children to sit 6 hours a day, believing that the air is somehow dangerous or somehow they're endangering their parents. It's not true. The masks don't work, and we are all getting beyond this disease, either through vaccinated immunity or through natural immunity that you get when you've been infected. So we have to just learn to move on, but we should not punish our children a day longer. I've got a map sitting in front of me. Almost half of Kentucky public schools are still mandating masks, even though you have scientists, even the scientists who love Dr. Fauci, the acolytes of Dr. Fauci that kneel and worship Dr. Fauci and say everybody should wear a mask and everybody should do all of this. Even those doctors on CNN, do you know what they describe now? They describe the facial cloth mask as nothing more than facial decoration. Really, even the doctors on CNN no longer believe that the cloth masks work. If you look at the CDC website doesn't say they don't work, it just says they're less effective, which is code for they don't work. The cloth masks don't work. And so really people need to be able to make their own decisions. For your school kids, the chance of death from COVID is about 1 in 1 million. The chance of being struck by lightning, about 1 in 600,000. So really, we have to put this in perspective, but we should not punish our children a day longer. Let our children live free, let them breathe the air, and get rid of the damn masks. As far as the vaccine passports, making people show their papers, guess what? If you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, you get the disease about the same amount. Now, I don't want people to misinterpret this. The vaccine, I think, still does protect you from hospitalization. It's just no longer protecting you from catching it or transmitting it. In fact, there was a study that looked at families, and if one member was affected and they got infected and they had the vaccine, and one member of a different family got infected and they did not have the vaccine, about 25% of the time they passed it on. It was about the same for both vaccinated and unvaccinated. So we need to get beyond this. We need to get beyond the polarizing rhetoric of, oh, we're not going to treat the unvaccinated and we need to treat them like lepers and segregate and punish them somehow for their decision. Look, if you've had the disease, your natural immunity is actually stronger than vaccinated immunity. So we're actually punishing people not based on science, based on political persuasion. There are actually people that live among us, and this is hard to believe, that live among us who actually believe that if you choose not to be vaccinated, you should be incarcerated, that you should be put in jail. My goodness, that is so inconsistent with everything that our country was founded upon. But let's hope we're getting beyond this. It looks like the dam is breaking. If you look in Democrat cities and Democrat states, even they are hearing from Democrat parents and Democrats' moms and dads and saying, we're tired of this. We're not going to do it anymore, and our kids need to have the freedom to take the mask off. It's already a two-tiered structure. Virtually the only people you see in the country wearing masks are either kids that are forced to in a public school or the people serving you in a restaurant. And it is sad. I hate the idea of seeing people all in the restaurants, all without their masks, sitting for hours, and the people, the servants, the people serving them, having to wear masks. It's unfair, it's terrible segregation, and it needs to end. It's not based on the science. The mask did not do anything to change the trajectory of this virus. The only thing that has slowed this virus down is vaccination and natural immunity, and they both work. Unless we admit that, we'll continue to think, oh my goodness, we have to vaccinate the newborns and all of these children. But you know what the science also shows? If you have a boy between the ages of 16 and 24, their risk for getting a heart inflammation from the vaccine exceeds that of the disease by about 10 to 15 fold. And what happens is every vaccine you give a young adolescent boy, the higher their risk is for this inflammation of the heart, which can kill them. So really, if it were my 15-year-old and you came to me as a physician, I would say, let's check antibodies to see if your son has already had the disease